I think maybe we'll get it started right about now. So hey everyone, thanks for coming tonight. Welcome to Architecture Society's lecture with Sarah from my first architecture job, and tonight she's going to be talking about 10 things I did not learn in architecture school. Before we pass it on to her, I just wanted to say one last quick reminder. If you guys haven't already, if you guys could go to lecture sign in with your name, ZID, and Discord username. This lecture is supported by ARC, so when you guys do attend and signed in, we are able to get funding and support to bring more society events. And that's about it. So I'll pass it on to Sarah.
My background, it's always interesting when you're a student, the various roles I've held as well as what I do now. I'll tell you about my first architecture job, the website as well, and then I'm going to take you through 10 of the topics out of my book, 101 Things I Didn't Learn in Architecture School and Wish I'd Known Before My First Job. I'm hosting from Canberra, which is an unknown country, so I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of the area. So as I said, I currently live in Canberra and I work I'm the principal architect at Lighthouse Architecture and Science, so that's my lovely team there, Zach the dog. So we're a multidisciplinary firm of architects and scientists, and I really wanted to start actually with a little video of a project we did that featured on a little TV show. It's just a fun little introduction. So I'm going to pop that in your lecture discussion. We can't get it to work live, but I'm hoping everyone can click on it and have a quick look at it now on your own device. And then we can come back in a minute. It only goes for 3 minutes. So please have a look at that now, and then we'll come back. you guys were able to watch that. It's just a nice little introduction to what our firm does. So as it was mentioned in the video, the owner and director of Lighthouse is a building scientist. So there's a few layers to that, really. One is during the modelling stage. So Jenny's is an analysis assessor. I'm going to explain that more. But we really, what it really means is that we simulate the design right from the early concept stage, and as we develop it, so that we can really optimise materials, eaves, windows, etc. And then we also do that testing once the home is built, which informs feedback to our own and improve things. And I guess core of our philosophy is that we can achieve really excellent energy efficiency using essentially standard construction techniques, so that we can really offer a cost-effective energy efficiency to a more mainstream market than perhaps what most architects are doing. My journey started in the industry, so in third year, I interviewed a architect for a project. I actually sort of sneakily picked him because I did want to work with him. And the interview went really well for the project, and I mentioned that I was job hunting. He sort of wanted to give me a job. He didn't have anything full-time at the time, but he invited me to come into his firm once a month and do paperwork and filing. So I jumped at that. It was a really great opportunity just to get a foot in the door and even just to see a firm, listen to how things worked. I only did that for a few months, and then through my networks, heard that another local firm, Philip Leeson Architects, were hiring. So I think that was actually through a Sona contact. I rang him up and had an interview and got a job with them. So they do more the projects on the right side there. I was with them for the rest of my third year. Then I wanted to take a gap year between my bachelor's and my master's, and they didn't have enough work to offer me a full-time job, and they were really happy. You know, there was no hard feelings if I could find a full-time job elsewhere. So I then did get a job with Stuart Architects, working on much bigger projects like this. So they do a lot of multi-res and commercial projects. I primarily worked on apartments and service departments for the time that I was there. These are a couple of the projects I spent a lot of time on. So I worked with them through my gap year, through my master's, and not long after I graduated from master's, I started keeping an ear out for other opportunities. I knew that staying in these sort of bigger commercial projects wasn't really my thing. I wanted to get back into residential, specifically with a focus on sustainability. So then I came across what was then called Jigsaw Housing. So Jigsaw Housing started with these three directors, Jenny the building scientist, Tom the builder, and Andy the architect. And they were really on a mission to solve that energy efficient, well-designed, affordable housing. And that's how we operated for the first few years, really as a in-house collaboration between architecture, building and building science. And at our peak, that was how big our team was. So yeah, about 50% were construction team. Then we had about 5 on the design team, a couple on the science, a couple on the admin team. It was a really good model until we got to that stage. And then as we started to grow, the demand for the design science sort of outstripped the building, and we wanted to diversify design and science as well. And anyone who's got any experience with building companies knows that it makes a lot more sense for building companies to actually stay quite niche and do what they want to do. So at that stage, it made sense for us to split, and we became Lighthouse Architecture and Science. At the same time, my architecture boss decided he wanted to go build, and so he went off and he's doing his own thing as well, which just left an incredible opportunity for me, and that's why I was able to step into that principal architect position, working under building scientist Jenny Edwards as sort of the business director and manager. originally joined Jigsaw to help them manage this idea of modular housing that they had. It's not modular construction. Most people think it's prefab construction. So I need to be clear about that. And so it's pre-designed modules that can click together really well. So I did a lot of background research on the project home industry and working out sort of what the good things were about it and what the bad things were about it. The good things obviously being they have a very streamlined process, they're affordable, they sort of limit options to keep everything buildable and affordable. The downsides being that obviously they're not designed for place, they're not designed for orientation, they're often not designed at all very much. So by developing this suite of pre-designed modules, so we've got sort of 4 or 5 kitchen types and 3 or 4 bathroom types that all go together really well, and then behind it we've got not selections that are as limited as a project home, but still fairly limited, and they stream under what we call basic, standard and upgrade, which is the language we use around choices to really help people know where they're tracking on their budget right from the start. So I really developed up that process. We still run that process. We also have what we call a custom design process for any blocks that are trickier or any budgets that are, more that custom high end, etc. And renovations are always in the custom stream. So we probably do about 30 or 40% modular projects. And then you can see we've been really successful with that. All those pictures down the bottom are modular projects that you can see on the website. Yeah, so that takes me to the book. So a few years ago, I was getting, I felt I was in this really sweet spot where I was really starting to get traction. I understood the industry and my role. I was a registered architect. Things were going well. But I also wasn't so far away from graduation and being a student that I'd forgotten how difficult that transition was. And I thought, there's not a lot of resources in this space. There's got to be a better way. And that really started with the book. So I'm sure you have the book, 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School. It's a beautiful book with little diagrams and sketches. And for a while I had thought, well, what we really need is the opposite of that, 101 things I didn't learn in architecture school. So I started with writing a book. And hopefully this will take me to, so, this is the contents page of the book. It's got a section on practice at the start, which sort of walks you through how firms work, how fees work, liability, contracts, consultants, common trades, things like that. It's really an introduction to the industry. Then there's a drafting section with good tips and how-tos and basic sizes of drafting things. There's a really big technical knowledge section which goes through sort of all the basics of those topics you can see there. What I found is there's plenty of construction books out there, but they go into a lot of detail on all the options that are possible. And I thought what you really need is someone to just walk you through what's the most common or what the key ideas are. So that's what the technical section does. There's quite a big section on ecologically sustainable design, because that's an area that I consider myself to be an expert in the industry just because of our firm. So I'm going to run through a couple of those today, but it sort of goes through the theories of ESD design, some of the technical terms, as well as all the various rating systems that are around, which I know I found really confusing in university. There's a small section on regulatory compliance, so going through all the rules that you come across in Australia and who runs them and what they sort of cover. A couple of items on managing clients, tips that I've learned over the years, a couple of items on specification, a section on beyond your firm, where to go to find on various things. And then it finishes with a you section, which is all of your personal development and professional development, things like job seeking and career development, and just some general tips that I learnt in those first few years. So for anyone that wants to grab a copy of the book, the easiest place is just to go to the website, and I've got that web address down the bottom, myfirstarchitecturejob.com/book. If you're just getting one, the easiest way is just to go to that link and grab it through Amazon or Booktopia or something. If any of you listening wanted to team up or try and get a few for your firm, I've had some firms buy sort of a small package for their new staff. You can send me an email and I can do a discounted price and send it directly to you. I'll bring that up again at the end. You'll also notice that this is a screenshot of the My First Architecture Job website. So once I had finished the book, I really started also just feeding out bits of information. I have a very active Instagram account. It also pushes to Facebook if you're only on Facebook. There's articles, there's a free job seeker workbook. There's a few other little resources on there. Sometimes we hold events. So it's just whatever I can fit in really to try and help the most students and graduates with the most pertinent information that I think you need in Australia. So today I'm going to run through 10 things I didn't learn in architecture school. So I've literally just picked out 10 topics that I thought would be really interesting for us to chat about tonight. It should give you a good coverage whether you are, you know, a first or second year just starting out with very little industry knowledge compared to a fifth year that's working in a firm. I think I've grabbed something for everyone. So let's have a look. So I started with number 8, contract administration. Contract administration is one of those terms that you will hear come up, especially when you start talking about registration. It's something that it's quite hard to get experience in for registration, and you'll probably hear that before you even understand what contract administration is. So it's a big, daunting term, but it's actually fairly straightforward, and I wanted to help you understand that tonight. So contract administration is the role of ensuring that the building contract is followed. That's it. That's all you're doing in that role. So it involves confirming that the construction drawings, specification and terms of the contract are met. So a contract isn't just the formal, that third document that gets filled out. The contract is also the drawings and the specification. The specification is sort of the written description that go in there. So when an architect is acting in a contract administration role, some of the key duties are you assess the progress and delay claims made by the builder. So the builder sends you a notification that says, all right, I've finished the brickwork stage, I'm ready to invoice that. You'll go out there and you check and you say, yeah, you're right, you have finished the brickwork, we can send that invoice to the client now. Or delay claims. So they might say, it's been raining, I need a delay added to the contract, and you'll say, yep, you're right, it did rain, I can see that held up the critical path, and you issue or approve a delay notice to the clients. Acting as an independent assessor of works at various key stages. So it's quite an interesting one because up until that point, you've specifically been working for the client in the client's best interests, and you're still doing that in one of your roles through the build. But when you're doing contract administration, you have to be impartial. You're an impartial judge of the contract. So if the client's being unreasonable about something, but the builder has built it to the standard specified, then it can turn around and you may have to say to the client, well, no, what's happened is fair and is as per the contract. Changes due to requests or unexpected site conditions. So if the client changes their mind on a tap, you would formally advise the builder of that change. Or in a renovation, if they've pulled the ceiling down and found that there was a fire in the ceiling and they'll have to replace some structures, you would say, yes, that's a genuine unforeseen event that needs to be rectified. And acting as the client's agent and issuing responses and instructions to the builder on the client's behalf. So when you're in that role, you really do take on being the client's representative for that legal instructional purpose. So the reason we don't hear about it as much anymore, but it's still seen as quite important, is it used to be a really core service that architects provided, but in recent decades, it's less common for architects to be engaged for those full services right through construction. And you'll find a lot of variations of the role as a response to that. So you might do formal contract administration, but you might provide a service where you will come along to site meetings and provide general advice during a site meeting, for example. And note that contract administration is not the same thing as project management. Project management is more about managing the whole build, is more commonly a term used with larger scale projects and is usually not done by the architect, although historically it often was. The next one I thought we would cover is the art of drafting, which is a little bit more fun. So, you know, you go through university and you've learnt that drafting is the most important means of communication, of communicating your project. But that becomes even more important when you get into an office. So you're not just communicating your ideas to the client, but you're also communicating what should be built and how should be built to the builder. And I think it's really interesting just to keep that in mind as a useful idea. So drawings are the primary means by which we communicate the design to the client, consultants, bank, builder, and trades. Just as a journalist or author must have excellent professional and consistent command of the English language, as well as choosing an appropriate tone for the work, we must approach the visual instruction for a design in a similar manner. And this is also really important in the context of thinking that at your job, you're working in a team. So you have to produce things consistently across your team. It's not just you doing your university presentation. So the images I've got here, you know, the top one's an elevation, but the bottom one's a section. The top one, you can see that the sort of effective line weights to show the form versus the cladding, the hierarchy of text that talks about different things. The ugly red cloud is a change that's happened since contract, so they're always highlighted in a really bold way so that they're picked up. Whereas when we go down to the section, it's talking much more about structure. The dark lines are really indicating what's being cut through so that it helps that drawing read visually. There's a hierarchy of detail in what we've chosen to show accurately versus what is shown a bit more diagrammatically. Sloppy and inconsistent drawings aren't just difficult to read, they also foster a general lack of care in the project that can easily rub off onto those using the drawings. All the hours spent designing and detailing a project should be reflected in the care and professionalism in which they're presented by taking pride in the presentation of your drawings, including layout, clarity, and consistency. You're passing on that same level of pride to those using the drawings, and you give the drawings the best chance of being communicated effectively. So I think that's an important one to remember too. If you're presenting a really clear, beautiful set of drawings, you're starting from the right foot. Again, two floor plans showing very different things. So the one on the left looks a little bit busy, but it's the main construction floor plan. The one on the right is focusing on the lighting. So a lot of that detail's been toned down, it's been greyed out, so they can just focus on that lighting. The other similar thing to note is the dimensioning on the first plan. So it's really done and ordered in terms of how things are built. So the closer in dimensions are the framing, because that happens first. Then it dimensions where the windows are based on the framing. So that's really critical. And then it sort of finishes with what cladding is where, so that they're clear on what cladding types it is. Okay, now we jump to the stages of construction, residential. And we're just going to run through what those stages are called and what each of them involves. So the first one, demolition, only if applicable. You all know what that is, knocking the house down. The site work stage, that's when the site is cleared and levelled and then cut or excavated. to really form up however the base of that site is going to be formed and what the levels will be. Then the main services go in, so the plumbing lines are run, and if needed, electricity conduits, anything that's going to get poured into the slab. And then the formwork goes up, if it's a concrete slab, to start creating the base of the house. So what you're looking at here, it's called a waffle pod slab. It's got these styrofoam blocks that create this automatic beam system once the concrete is poured, and they also provide under slab insulation, which not quite as important in Sydney, but very important in Canberra where it's cold. Framing, so whether you're using timber or steel framing, that structure's created of the walls and the roof. Here you can also see those boards on the edge of the slab, the slab edge insulation. Again, that's critical in Sydney, but pretty critical in Canberra. Lockup. So this is one of those ambiguous ones I didn't learn for a while, but lockup is really when the house is able to be locked up. It's that simple. So the cladding's on, the roofing is on, the windows and external doors are on. And then that's when the plumbers and electricians start pulling all their wiring through the house and laying out all of the services where they need to be. Then the insulation goes in. And then you have what's called Fixout or fit off. There's some different terms depending on what state you're in Australia. That's where all of that internal plasterboard, architraves, skirting, cornices are installed to close off that inner surface. And things like tiling, joinery, flooring are fitted, and those plumbing and electrical fixtures are connected, and then it's painted. Landscaping, you all know, sometimes there'll be a bit of an overlap. They might start doing the landscaping while the fit out and fix off is still happening. Practical completion is just kind of what it sounds like. The home has to be substantially complete and reasonably fit to move in. And that's when the certificate of occupancy, the name varies on the location, is granted. So there still might be little things that need to be fixed at that stage, but that's when the client can take possession and insurances pass over and things like that. And then there's a warranty or defects liability period. There's always a few months or 6 months or a year, depending on what contract you're using, where the builder rectifies any minor things that might come up. So a classic one is as the house sort of settles and moves, some little cracks or splits might appear, and the builder will go back at the end of that warranty period and seal those up. Sometimes bigger things occur as well. All right, let's move to number 29, condensation. Sounds boring, incredibly technical and kind of a very deep topic, and definitely one that I did not hear about at all at university. So firstly, what is condensation? It's those drops you get on your window, and again, you may not get this in Sydney, really common in Canberra. Water droplets that form when water vapour, so it's moist air, comes in contact with a cool surface. If condensation forms in a wall, roof or floor cavity, it can lead to serious mould issues, ineffective insulation and structural damage. So it's a big issue because the way we used to build homes, without not a lot of insulation and with a lot of leaks and drafts, wasn't a problem because the moist air from the house just sort of vented out. But what we're doing now is we're building much better houses. They're well insulated, so we've got a lot of that moist air in the house that needs to be able to escape without us having lots of leaks. Had a really big issue in New Zealand. They had what's called sick building syndrome as they updated their insulation standards a bit before us, and while some of us might be used to seeing this kind of condensation on windows, the real issue is when it's condensing in your wall frame or in your roof frame. And that can lead to hidden mold and structural damage. And it's really disgusting and horrible and a big issue. So how do we manage it? It is simple to manage if you understand it. So it's really about thinking of the surfaces we're using in the wall systems and the roof systems. And you can have surfaces, fabrics, for example, that are what we called vapor permeable membranes. So they're just like a breathable jacket that you wear at the snow. They will stop water or weather on one side. So if there's water poured on them, the water won't go through. But if there's that warm vapor in the air, so that wet air, which is a much finer particle, it can migrate through and out the building. So it can breathe without being drafty, if that makes sense. It's magic. I was recently at the Australian Bushfire Building Conference in Sydney, and there was a really great presentation by Dr. Mark Dewsbury from the University of Tasmania. He is a bit of an expert on this stuff, and I wanted to show a few of his slides with full credit to him. So that picture there is showing a really horribly rotted frame in a relatively new home because it wasn't designed properly for that flow of vapor. The basic is that the most important thing to know about condensation and water vapor is that it varies between many regions and climates in Australia, as well as site microclimates, and even within the construction and cladding system that you're using. So the National Construction Code has provisions for condensation management, and if you really want to get into it, there's a ABCB condensation in building booklet that's a really detailed resource on it. So just be aware, even if, we think, for example, Sydney and Canberra aren't that far apart, climate vastly different. Buildings need to be designed and constructed differently. And it's a real concern for us in Canberra when project home companies are delivering the same product here as they are in Sydney. If you want to go into more detail, Dr. Mark Dewsbury's slides below were quite good. So he just spoke about the key principles. You need a thermal control layer. So you're getting that really bad condensation where you've got warm internal air hitting a cold surface. So that's why we insulate well. That's why aluminium windows that aren't thermally broken have condensation. If you've got a steel beam in a wall that has no insulation, you might get condensation against it in the plasterboard. You need that vapor control layer, as I was talking about, that membrane. So you always have a membrane in a wall that's stopping any weather getting in, and it's also directing any moisture in the wall cavity back out. So there's always a weather membrane or a sarking or whatever, or foil they used to be called, in a wall, but these days it needs to be breathable, so it's a vapor control layer that vapor can get out of. A water control layer, so noting that moisture will form on that side of the between the vapor control layer and the cladding, so you need sort of a space and a way for that to get out. That's why we have weep holes in bricks. That's for moisture to get out. And then ventilation, that little space on the outside needs to have a little bit of ventilation in it, even though we want the inside of the house to be nice and airtight to avoid drafts. And then on the right, that was just more of a diagrammatic example of a wall section, how that works. So inside you've got the air control layer, the plasterboard, where we're trying to limit gaps, both to control the internal temperature and to make sure there's not all this wet air escaping into the walls. Then you've got your insulator, then you've got your gap that has your vapor control layer in it, and then you've got your cladding, which is really your weather barrier on the outside. All right, everyone take a deep breath. I feel like that one's quite dense, but hopefully it gives something to those who are a bit more experienced. And I want to highlight that too. The book really ranges from very simple introductory things to more technical. So number 37, brick veneer walls. This one's a bit simpler for the ones new to the construction knowledge game. This is the most common wall type in Australia. It usually consists of a 90mm timber stud, a 50mm cavity, air cavity, and then a 110mm wide brick. The diagram below is from another item in the book, but I popped it in just so you've got a picture of what section through that brick looks like. The plasterboard is fixed to the timber stud frame on the inside, and typically there's insulation sitting within the timber frames, and then that dashed line is the sarking or membrane or vapor permeable membrane or wall wrap, whatever you want to call it, on the external side of the timber frame. A lot of people assume that bricks are structural, but they're nearly always a brick veneer. So a veneer being something that's applied on the outside, they're acting exactly the same as a timber or a fibre cement or a metal cladding is. They're not structural, they're a non-load bearing weatherproofing material, just like any other cladding. And there's a range of different ways to finish mortar between bricks, and the most common finishes are below raked, iron, struck, and flush. Okay, I want to take you through some ESD stuff. It always really shocks me at university that there's still a lot of graduates who still really don't understand solar passive design very well. So 59 is how to sun angles diagram, and then I'm going to take you through 60, which is how to react to that sun angles diagram. So you can find the sun angle diagram for any location at that address guys. The circle above shows the angles for Canberra. Canberra has a cool temperate climate that really benefits from solar passive design because we have very cold but very sunny winters. So a solar diagram like this shows the path of the sun during the year. It's from a bird's eye view. So we want to imagine that we're standing at the centre of that circle, and then the diagram is the green representation of that diagram. So across the top one, you'll see two thick dark lines. The top one is the winter sun path, the winter sunrise, right around the day to the winter sunset on the west. And then the bottom line is the summer sunrise. So again, rising in the east, setting in the west, but doing so much further south. The circles that radiate out from the centre, they're indicating the angle that the sun is from the horizon. So for example, if you follow that summer solstice line, in the middle of the day, you can see that it's almost over the centre of that sheet, of that circle, which means it's almost directly over the top of us. Whereas on that winter one, you can see that it's being that 30-degree line. So it's only 30 degrees up from the horizon. So if we were standing looking north, it would appear much lower in the sky. And then it's also interesting to note how different the locations of the sunrise and sunset are between winter and summer. So then if we go to the next one, how to respond to a sun angles diagram, if we were using that same sun angle location. In our climate of hot summers and cold winters, this is sort of a section through the house showing that northern face of glazing. So hopefully you're familiar with this diagram. To the north of the house, an optimized eave or horizontal shading can automatically maximize that winter solar heat gain. So that lower angle in the sun, it comes in really deep, but blocking out any summer sunstrike to the window. And so the offset and projection of that shading device should be considered depending on where you are in Australia and what you're wanting to achieve and how dramatic those sun angles are. So here is a picture of one of our homes with the sun angles modelled. The top one is middle of the day in summer. You can see that nearly all the glazing is completely shaded. The bottom one's the middle of the day in winter, and you can see that the sun is just flooding into that house. So that's the north. The north is fairly easy to understand. To the east and the west, though, what do you do? you really need either retractable shading, deciduous planting, or vertical blades or louvres that can give you that control, because you're always going to have low angle, harsh sun in summer and in winter. So you want to capture it in winter, but you really want to block it out in summer. So you can't do much with eaves and horizontal shading because they don't do a lot when the sun's coming down at those low angles. So you really want to go to either an operable vertical system or a deciduous planting that loses its leaves during summer. Or you can sometimes do vertical louvres that are angled to suit those two different sunrise and sunset locations. So you can see there that if we had some vertical louvers on the side of the house that were angled to just above east and west, those more southerly summer sunrise and sunsets, but it would completely let in those winter sunrise and sunsets. What happens on the south, you get a tiny bit of sunstrike in summer, you get none in winter. So essentially on the south, it's always happening when you don't want it. So you just limit your glazing to the south. It's never that useful for you. You're just putting it where you need it for some natural light, a bit of ventilation, or a view. Okay, I'm going to talk about energy efficiency rating tools, and I've got another video to pop in the link for you. Let me do that, and then I'm then going to go grab a drink of water because I'm losing my voice while I do that. Sorry, let me navigate your complex. There we go. You guys watch that. I'll go grab a glass of water. Okay, hopefully you had a chance to watch that. Now, David and Emily, I think because there was more people in here, I can't turn my video back on. So hopefully you can still hear me though. Can you let me know if you can still hear me?
Yep. All
right, I'll continue anyway. So it's really interesting talking to all of you being based in Sydney, because New South Wales is the only state that has its own different system. So you guys have the basic system for residential. The rest of Australia focuses a lot more on this NATA's star rating. So there's also, BASIX is also a section that's covered in the book, along with other rating systems. But I really want to talk about NATA's because I'd love you guys to understand it, even though practitioners around you probably aren't talking about it that much. So around the rest of Australia, the minimum star rating is usually 6. I think there's maybe one other state that has 5. And NATA's, as it says, uses all of this data from Bureau of Meteorology and simulates the house in its exact location. And it's what we use to optimise our design. It's a really smart tool that unfortunately mainly gets used at the moment at the end of the process as sort of a box ticking method. But we use it throughout. We help clients decide on things like how their floor covering might affect the energy rating, or if they really do want a big window to the east or west, we can help them understand how much that might affect the comfort of the room and how willing they are to penalise that energy rating to get that extra view. So it's a really fantastic tool. As I think it mentioned in the video, 0-star rating means there's no difference between inside and outside. 10-star rating means you don't need any artificial heating or cooling. What most of Australia also doesn't understand is that means it's easier to achieve a higher rating in a milder climate. So star ratings don't mean the same thing in each area in some ways. So our homes, we have a very harsh climate. Some of our homes that are 8 stars, if we pop them in Sydney and model them, which we've done, they almost get to 10. So it's a really important thing to understand. It's also not a lineal scale. So an 8-star home is predicted to use half the energy of a 6-star home. And the third thing to understand is that it's per square metre. So you find a lot of people in the general industry will say, oh, well, I've got an 8-star house, but the person down the road that has a 6-star home that's half the size is using the same amount of energy to heat and cool. So it's a brilliant tool. You guys have, I think, that's my next slide. So there's a few of those notes that I had. NATA's only focuses on the thermal performance. So it doesn't consider embodied energy or energy used to run appliances like hot water. And the minimum requirements vary by location, as I've said. So the positive of BASIX that you guys use in New South Wales is that it does think about things like water collection and water use, the energy used by appliances, for example, lighting. So that's a great positive. But, and it's a bit controversial to say this, we would say that the thermal modelling used behind BASIX is a really poor engine. It's nowhere near as sophisticated as NATA's. So you can use a NATA's certificate to sort of override that thermal section of BASIX, but you can pass BASIX with I think it's a 4 or 5-star NATA's house. So you really need to be careful in New South Wales because potentially you have a lot of homes getting through that are far less energy efficient than 6 stars required in the rest of the country. I hope I've explained that right. There's more resources on that on our website where Jenny, the building scientist, answers that more correctly. Okay, next one. 87, job seekers. Don't just blind email your resume. This picture summarises how I feel when I open my email inbox every day. It's just complete overload. And, if I receive a resume, I will have a look, but what you need to remember is that the way you seek a job says a lot about your strengths and weaknesses. In our industry, good communication, initiative, and motivation are highly sought after skills. Blind emailing a company with a really generic employment email demonstrates none of those skills. So particularly when you're coming to a firm with very little experience, what other things are you showing? You're showing those soft personal skills. And and they're what you can demonstrate by contacting a firm differently. So if you're emailing, make it personal. Research the company, tell them why you're interested in working with them and why you might be a good fit for their team. Even better, combine your email with a phone call, or perhaps in non-COVID times, drop in a physical copy of your portfolio. It's a great way to attempt to ask to speak to someone senior who you might meet, or it even just shows a bit more initiative. The last time we ran interviews, I can still remember the one person that dropped in a physical copy. It made, even though he didn't get the job, it made a real impression on me. And I also went out of my way to give him extra feedback when he came in to pick that up. So think of how you can demonstrate your skills in the way that you're contacting a firm. A surprising percentage of jobs in our industry are filled by word of mouth. So building your architecture network and making yourself known by participating in local events and getting to know local architects is really key often to finding those job opportunities. If you're not successful, ask for feedback. If they're not hiring, ask when might be a good time to get in contact again. If you are particularly set on one firm, ask if you can do work experience, or if you might be able to buy the director or senior staff member a coffee to discuss career advice. A director of a large firm recently said to me, when we hire, we're really looking for a potential and a willingness to learn rather than their current skills. So don't be afraid of job hunting sooner rather than later. And please remember to check what an employer will find if they Google you. I'm always amused by what I can find about potential staff members on the internet, public Facebook profiles, all kinds of things. And that's a good time to note that on our website, we have a free job seeker workbook. So that web address is there. My first architecture job, with a spelling mistake in it. Make sure you spell architecture right. myfirstarchitecturejob.com. 99, I think this is my final one. How to handle not knowing the answer. I was always afraid of not knowing the answer, but being asked a question on site when you don't understand what the builder's talking about can be terrifying. But there are some simple tricks I picked up that you can handle this situation. So number one, be honest. Most of the time, if you confess that you're out of your depth and ask for further explanation, the other person will be happy to educate you. Refer back to a senior staff member. So a line like, I'm really not across this area and I'll need to check that with so-and-so. I'll get back to you this afternoon. Can work a treat. And as you gain more experience and you sort of don't have a senior person, so this is the one I use sometimes. Good question. What do you think? Or do you have a suggested solution? And the beauty of that is that, well, one, you've flattered them by asking for their opinion. Two, usually in them explaining their idea, you can sort of work out what they're asking, and it buys you a little bit of time to think about the answer. So as I mentioned, lots of resources for all of you on our website. These are a couple of YouTube virtual events we've held recently, one about registration and one where we asked a heap of anonymous questions to architects that our audience had submitted. And down the bottom there, I've also got the web address. We've got a lot of articles on recent topics, and the Instagram is where most of our stuff gets pushed to and how most people keep in regular touch with what we do. And I've also got a new membership program. So I was increasingly getting asked questions, and I really wanted to help all the students and graduates that were speaking to me, but I've got really limited time. So we've now got a little membership platform. It's $5 a week, and what members get out of that are a few things. We have a guest expert session every fortnight. So these are some of the guests we've got in this quarter. There's quarterly themes. So the quarterly theme at the moment is self-development and professional development, and then we'll go into construction, then we'll look at practice, for example. And then within that, there's a fortnightly theme with a little challenge designed to be done in half an hour or less, just to make sure that you're ticking over those results and getting that transformation. And there's a weekly drop-in session where you can come chat to me with questions you might be having, or we might talk about the theme for that week. And there's a lot of topics where you can ask everyone else in there for things like you can get thoughts on your portfolio and resume or discuss something that happened at work. It's not on Facebook, it's on its own membership platform site called Mighty Networks, so you get your own app and everything. Anyway, there's a 2-week free trial, so if anyone's thinking about coming into that, you can come check it out for free for a couple of weeks. It's down the address at the bottom there, members.myfirstarchitecturejob.com. And I think I'm going to leave it there. Yeah, so that's the details on where you can get the book. If those topics were interesting to you and you want to learn more about the things I didn't learn in architecture school, and as I said, if you want to team up with friends or colleagues, then you can let me know and I can get you the book a bit cheaper with a direct sale. There you go. I ended up filling up the hour anyway, David and Emily. But yeah, very happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to type it into the lecture discussion.
I need to find that again. There's no way I can turn my video back on, is there?
I think you can just press. Oh, actually, no, you can't.
Yeah, that's okay. You don't need to see my face anyway. Hopefully that covered something of interest to everyone. And I am honestly happy to answer any questions. One of the big things I promote on my platform is you don't have to feel stupid or embarrassed to ask me anything about the industry or my experience. But clearly I've been incredibly thorough and you have no questions.
I think I personally have a question to ask.
Yeah.
So usually when I think of networking, I think of attending industry events and then going up to someone after the event, networking with them that way, or even other members of the audience who may have asked an interesting question. Seeing that now it's COVID and it's all online, how do you think we can go about that when it's harder?
Yeah, super tough. I've been encouraging, I've been talking to my members about this, and obviously a membership platform like the one we've got is helping them network with like-minded people. But for those really looking to make those connections with more experienced peers, there's still a lot of avenues. Volunteering can be a great way, so getting involved with your local, whether that's your SONA committees, which are connected to the Institute. And there's always going to be local events on where they're looking for volunteers. So for the moment in Canberra, for example, we've got our Design Canberra Festival coming up. They always want volunteers. And if you can help out with that, that's a really brilliant way to then get to know those other architects that are working on that project. Similarly, if you join a network like NAWIC, National Association of Women in Construction, I've got a whole list of networks in the book that you can find as well. Volunteering can be a great way to get to know people by working on projects with them. And I think that's one of the ones that probably is still going. You can try and attend things like Parlour are having their midday Monday sessions. They're specifically for students and graduates. I haven't been to one of those, but you can try to reach out and connect. I think those were the key ways that I came up with. If you do have people that you know of, but perhaps aren't that connected with, you could still try that. Hey, could we have a couple or lunch? I'll Uber a coffee or morning tea or lunch to your house, and maybe we can have a video chat. I know you're not that locked down in Sydney, but if you were in Melbourne, perhaps that would work. Those would be my ideas.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that.
No worries. David was tentatively typing anything, but it's been teasing me and it hasn't turned up. So I'm not sure if you chickened out, David. He's typing again. And Ben. I'd love to know from you guys as well, whether you're working in a firm or not, what year you're at in your studies. So, yeah, just pop that in the chat as well, so I can have an idea of who I'm talking to.
I'm sure. I lost my train of thought.
Oh, and my face is back. Everyone for a moment there, but hopefully you can hear me again now. I'm not sure.
Hi Sarah, I don't think we can hear you at the moment.
Ah, someone just said they can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Maybe it's just me.
Great, a few people can hear me. That's good. All right, thank you for your notes. So, first year master's not working. Third year job hunting. First year with a question. First year student, and I'm wondering if architecture firms might observe any design competitions to look for student talent. Should I be looking to enter works into things like other competitions? Yeah, absolutely. I think it shows real initiative and drive if you are doing things outside of your university program, and I'm always really impressed by that, as well as good time. Any other questions? Lots of people. I was going to mention with Emily's question as well, with the networking, I think it's a really good time to formalise a mentoring relationship. So whether that's through the Institute's Mentor Loop program or reaching out to someone that you know to ask them if they could have a ongoing relationship with you. Plenty of resources out there on how to go about getting a mentor. But that can be a nice way to make sure that you've got a bit of a formalized network, and often they can put you in touch with other people as well. Okay, I'm just wondering whether emailing old colleague or mentor from an old confirms the idea for a job or an opportunity. And if they don't respond, should I be persistent or not? Yeah, I think you try whatever avenue you can to get contacts. I'm assuming you're meeting at that firm anymore. So yeah, if you have a relationship with them and you think they might be able to connect you with someone, go for it. You've really got to milk every connection you can find to try and build up those networks. And I mean that one, should you be persistent? That's really up to you and your understanding of your relationship. And you don't want to annoy people. And I'd also just really encourage you guys, wherever you can, pick up the phone rather than an email. It's so easy to send an email and they get lost. I'm always more impressed if I can chat to someone. Even if I don't always chat to them. If I've got a message and I know that they did call the firm, at least I know they did. And Nick is from second year from QUT and snuck in. I'm sorry your work experience job fell through, Nick, but keep up with it. And yeah, didn't think about calling them. Yeah, go for it. Boom. I did. Communication is more effective over voice. Could be something by worrying about coming across too pushy, or also if you put them on the spot, they're more likely to say yes. Donna and Ben are typing. Here we go. David, never any silly questions, David. So what you said about sun path diagrams reminded me of how poorly I did in architecture science this year. In terms of your independent learning at university, is it worth revisiting subjects or refining studio projects that you didn't do well with? Will this reflect in practice and competence? I don't think that's a question at all, David. I mean, I would have really struggled with revisiting the same projects, but I think it's really brilliant to look back on, reflect on how you've gone and focus on the areas that you want to improve. Every semester I used to, think about what I was struggling with. So I remember one semester my visual presentation of the previous semester had let me down. So that next semester I really focused on that as something I wanted to skill on. So, I mean, obviously, if you wanted to put projects in a portfolio, you wouldn't put them in if you're not happy with them, you'd refine them. And remember, you can do that. You don't have to put in your portfolio exactly what you had presented at uni. It's not lying or anything. But I think it's a real personal skill to be proud of, David, if you can reflect on things you did find tricky or don't feel you spent enough time on, or areas that you can improve on, and then seek out that learning elsewhere. Remember that once you leave university, you still need to be learning a lot. So it's good to work out how you can continue learning and developing outside of university for your own interests. Ruth, another QUT person snuck in. I think that's okay. I don't think these guys have a problem with that. I love that you mentioned the solar analysis. Wish I'd known that in undergrad. Yeah, it amazes me how many courses don't really cover it effectively. And I mean, I only spoke about the Canberra scenario, but obviously, you move up to Darwin, for example, it's a much different scenario in that the sun's in a different spot and you're mainly just wanting to block it the whole year round. So you adapt and you respond accordingly. For those interested in the science stuff, our website, Lighthouse, lighthouseteam.com.au has also a lot of free resources and information on what we do and approach. That's really great for those interested in the residential sustainability stuff. When it comes to putting a portfolio together, do you add in all the information about your design, or do you give a little bit, and in that way you make your interviewers more curious about your design and hopefully give you more chances into getting a call back? On balance. So you want to communicate what strengths you're wanting to demonstrate in your portfolio. So there's a workbook on the website that we sell for $7 or something on portfolio and resume design, and it talks about I guess it's a little bit like how to contact an office. So don't just be the wording that you had from your university presentation into your portfolio. Start fresh, think about who you do, think about what the key ideas were, what you're wanting to communicate, and remember that most portfolios get flicked through very quickly. I don't have a lot of reading time, so you want to keep it short and sweet and beautiful. A common approach is to send one that's a little bit more pared back and have a more in-depth one, perhaps with more information that you can take into an interview. In our member community, we focused on that topic this week. Actually, we had a great session with Stephen Drew. He's an architect now turned architect career expert, and you can Google him. He has some great YouTube, I think, videos on portfolios, or any of you think about our membership community. You can come in, you can see pictures, you can try it out at free trial, I don't mind, and then if you don't want to hang around, you can leave. Donna says, thank you for your time and the discussion. Super interesting. I'm a third-year architecture studies student, currently looking for work. I was wondering what your opinion is on how many pages your portfolio should be. Yeah, this one's like, how long is a piece of string? Sure that there's a correct answer. But, you know, for the sake of what's most common, maybe anywhere between, I don't know, 8 to 16 or something. You know, if you're getting quite long, if you've only got 6 or so pages, that's not much. But it all depends on what format yours takes, how much information it is. And I mean, ask your friends. Once you've done one, send it to those contacts that you have, even if that's just peers or non-architecture people, get their feedback. And my number one, oh my gosh, most people do their portfolios and resumes in InDesign at the moment. InDesign has terrible spell checking capability and hyphens everything. So you have to turn off hyphenation and use something like Grammarly, which is a free spelling and grammar checking tool that will pick up a lot of things, and get friends to read it for you. Your resume and portfolio should be representing the absolute best of yourself. So, you know, if there's sloppy things like spelling errors, that really disappoints me, and I do that partially. All right. Maybe that's it.
Does anyone have any more questions at all? Last question? No? Okay. Well, on behalf of ArcSoc, I want to say a huge thank you for coming with, to speak to us tonight.
No worries. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you all got something out of it.
Yep. So this concludes the lecture for tonight. Just a reminder for everyone to sign in if you haven't already, and stay tuned for future ArcSoc events by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and this Discord channel. Okay, thank you and have a good night.
I've got to take too much screenshots.